Hello everyone, I'm Kiran Joshi. Hope you all are doing good. Children, this is the second video of Class 6 History Chapter 10 New Empires and Kingdoms. In the first video, we learnt about Gupta dynasty, about Harshvardhana, about Pallava dynasty, and about Pulkeshin II of Chalukya dynasty. Now let's try to understand the administration of these kingdoms and empires that emerged during 1700 to 1400 years ago. As we know that from the administrative point of view, land revenue was very important for the earlier kings and the basic unit of administration was village. This system continued in this period also. Besides, some new things were also introduced during this period. The rulers in this period took support of the powerful men to administer their kingdoms and empires. These men were powerful because of their economic or social or political and military strength. So, children, to get the support of such powerful men, rulers adopted many steps. For example, they made some important administrative posts as hereditary, and in these posts, sons were appointed after their fathers. For example, you have learnt about Harisena, who was a poet at the court of Samudragupta. So he became Mahadandanayak, means chief judicial officer, just like his father. It means before Harisena, his father held this post. Another step that the rulers adopted was that many a times one person was made in charge of many offices. For example, Harisena again. Harisena was not only a Mahadandanayaka but also a Kumar Amatya, which means an important minister and a Sandhi Vigrahika, which means a minister of war and peace. In this way, he held many important offices at one time. As it was mentioned earlier, that the powerful men supported the rulers, therefore, they had an important place in the local administration. Children, some important men were Nagar Shreshthi, means chief banker or merchant of the city, the Sarthvaha, means the leader of the merchant caravans, Pratham Kulika means the chief craftsman, and the head of the Kayasthas or scribes. These men were so influential that they could affect the local administration. Such steps helped the rulers in administration. But at the same time, these policies were sometimes harmful for the rulers because some of these powerful men became so strong that they established their independent kingdoms. Now let's talk about the army maintained in these kingdoms and empires. Children, we know that the earlier rulers maintained their armies with elephants, chariots, cavalry means soldiers who rode horses, and foot soldiers. The rulers of these new kingdoms and empires also maintained such well organized armies. Other than that, the kings were provided troops by some military leaders whenever the kings needed. These military leaders did not get regular salaries from the kings. Rather, such of military leaders were given grants of lands by the kings. The military leaders collected uh, a revenue from the land grants. Further, the revenue was used to maintain their troops, for example, to maintain soldiers and horses, and to provide equipments required for warfare. So, such military leaders who received grants of lands were known as Samantas. There are evidences, children, that whenever these Samantas found the ruler weak or less powerful, they tried to become independent ruler. Now let's learn about the assemblies in the southern kingdoms during this period. There were several local assemblies mentioned in the inscriptions of the Pallavas. For example, the Sabha, which was an assembly of Brahmin landowners. This assembly had various subcommittees, and each subcommittee had a specific task or function, such as irrigation, cultural activities, making roads, local temples, etc. Children, another assembly was the Ur, which was a village assembly. The Ur was found in those areas where the owners of the land were not Brahmins. The inscriptions mention another assembly also, that is Nagaram, which was an organization of merchants. Perhaps the rich, wealthy, and powerful people, usually the landowners and merchants, controlled these nagarams. It is believed that many of these local assemblies functioned or worked for several hundred years. Till now, we have learnt about the administration, the army, and about various assemblies in the kingdoms during 1700 to 1400 years ago. Now, let's try to understand about the life of the common people in these kingdoms. How do we know about the lives of the ordinary people of that time? So, children, we get this information through plays, pilgrims' accounts, biographies, etc. For example, we have learnt that Kalidasa was a poet and a playwright in Chandragupta Vikramaditya's court. His plays give a lot of information about the life in the king's court. In his plays, Kalidasa has shown the king and the Brahmins conversing or talking in Sanskrit, while the other men and women speaking in Prakrit. It means Sanskrit was learnt by a handful of people, and common people used Prakrit for communication. Kalidasa's most famous play is Abhigyan Shakuntalam. This play depicts the story of love between a king named Dushyant and a young woman named Shakuntala. Through this play, it is shown that the condition of ordinary people was not good. For instance, here is the description of the unfortunate condition of a poor fisherman in this play. It says, a fisherman found a precious ring which the king had given to Shakuntala, but which had been accidentally swallowed by a fish. When he went to the palace with it, the gateman accused him of theft, and the chief police officer was rather rude. However, the king was happy when he saw the ring and sent a reward for the fisherman. Then the police officer and the gateman decided to take a share of that reward and went along with the fisherman to have a drink. This shows that the common people, especially the poor, were exploited at that time. Children, we know that caste division existed in the society. It is reflected from the account of the Chinese pilgrim Fahian also, in which he mentioned how the untouchables were treated by the so-called high caste and powerful people. Children, untouchables were those people who cremated the dead. They were compelled to stay on the outer areas of the towns and were considered as pollutants in the towns and cities. Fayan mentions in his account that if an untouchable entered a town or a marketplace, he had to strike a piece of wood on the ground so that people could hear the sound and thus could avoid touching or brushing against that untouchable. Even the biographies also help us to know the life of the ordinary people. For example, Banbhatta, the court poet of Harshvardhana, gives a clear image of the king's army on the move. He writes, the king travelled with an enormous amount of equipment. Apart from weapons, there were things of daily use such as pots, pans, furniture, golden footstool, food including animals such as goat, deer, rabbits, vegetables, spices carried on carts or loaded onto pack animals such as camels and elephants. This huge army was accompanied by musicians beating drums and others playing horns and trumpets. Villagers had to provide hospitality along the way. They came with gifts of curds, good and flowers, and provided fodder for the animals. They also tried to meet the king and place their complaints and petitions before him. The army left a trail of destruction behind. Elephants often trampled down the huts of villagers, and the oxen yoked to the caravans of merchants ran away, scared by the tumult. As Banbhatta says, the whole world was swallowed up in dust. Through this description, it is clear that when the king and his army moved, they received various gifts from the people in the villages along the way, such as curd, good flowers, or etc. Villagers also provided fodder for the animals of the army. And when the army left the place, it left a trail of destruction behind. So, children, these were some important points about the kingdoms and empires that emerged about 1700 to 1400 years ago. Now, here are some questions. So, the first question is, how were the kingdoms administered during the Gupta dynasty? Second question, give a brief account of the military leaders during the period of 1700 to 1400 years ago. Third question, describe the assemblies and their functions in the southern kingdoms. Fourth question, describe in brief the condition of ordinary people in the kingdom. Children, if you found this video helpful and wish to watch more of such content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Also, if you have any queries or comments, please post them in the comment section below. Thank you.